Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. I hope you've had the opportunity to tune in the last couple of times. We've had Bart Stone on, Bart's a very well-known aviator here in Alaska and a very talented CFI and a lot of experience, over 30,000 hours. And we've been talking about off-airport operations, and here we are in August. Bart's talked about things we all know about, but we have to remind ourselves, like the importance of proficiency, the importance of recency, and the importance of practice. He's also talked about what it takes to do a real spot landing, what kind of criteria you should use. He talked a little bit about airspeed control. So I want to try and wrap it up tonight with just a couple more questions. Bart, welcome back.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's see, we talked about airspeed. How about takeoff? Go, no go?
Well, everybody should have a built-in decision point where they're not going to continue the flight. And I've seen several accidents over the years where the people actually aborted the flight a little bit too late, and they ran into the trees at the end of the strip. But it was a much better outcome for the aircraft and the passengers and the pilot than if they tried to take off and smashed into the trees, say 20 or 30 feet off the ground. These aborted takeoffs were done right at ground level, so there was no dropping, there was no damage from injuries from falling out of the tree. So if you fall out of a tree, there's actually a couple of programs on how to crash. It's not so much the flying into the tree that's going to injure people and definitely damage the aircraft, but it's the dropping, it's the vertical speed that the aircraft isn't designed for that. The seats aren't designed for that. Most people don't have shoulder harnesses. They don't have their safety belts on right, but you should know and should have a performance criteria where you know how to call it quits and stop safely. Maybe offload fuel, offload a passenger, and say, I'm going to come back in small strips and go in small trips, but I'm going to go over and land at a bigger strip, and I'll be back to pick you up, and we're going to just make a few more extra trips to get out of here safely.
So do you use the 70-50 rule of thumb?
The 70-30, yeah, it works really well. That when you're 70% down the length of the runway, you want to have at least 50% of your flying speed to be able to get out of there. And so you should know your liftoff speed pretty good. And that's why you learn. That's why you practice prior to going in these places. Learn what the airplane will lift off at. When you go practice and you're working in a short field situation, don't do it by yourself at lightweight, because that's usually not the way you're going to be flying. When you leave that little short strip, you're going to have your buddy with you, maybe his dog, you know, all the meat. Maybe you've got a moose or something like that, and you got a quarter of a moose. Performance criteria is different when you have a full load.
Okay. Three-point landing versus wheel landing.
I use them both. If it's a narrow, skinny runway, and maybe it's got a dog leg in it that you can't see from a three-point attitude, it's better to do a two-point, to me, do a two-point landing and carry a little bit of power, keep the tail up, and use judicious use of the brakes, bring yourself to a stop, and then lower the tail down, so that way you can avoid rocks. Maybe if there's a dog leg that you got to go around. If you land at a three-point attitude on a narrow, skinny runway, a lot of times, unless you've got a good heading indicator or you got a tree on the horizon or something like that, you can lose directional control real easy.
And not see where you're going.
And not, yeah, it just blocks your view.
Let's talk about weather. Options. You and I have flown together. We've had to execute options to turn around and go back. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you should always know where you're at all times. Don't depend 100% on, say, one of your electronic devices like a Garmin 396 or something like that, because I'm here to tell you they do shut off, and at the most inopportune time. So you better always have a plan on say there's a strip behind you, 10 minutes or something like that, back at a certain heading that you know you can get to fairly safe. But you should have your personal minimums, and if you're flying in unfamiliar country, you should raise those minimums. Because if you're into unknown country, maybe your minimums that work, say between Anchorage and Squitna, won't work very well between Lake Clark Pass and Port Ellsworth.
Yeah.
Because it's a different country. There's not very many outs in case something goes wrong, the weather closes in. So, but you can always call ahead to a lot of people. There's a lot of operators you can call, ask them how the weather's doing. Just check out all your resources you can, because weather cams aren't, they're just here and now. And if you're there 2 hours from now, what the weather cam showed 2 hours before
That'd be different.
could be entirely different.
Bart, thank you for being on these couple of programs, and thank you for sharing some of your experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've been able to tune in, and I hope you've taken to heart some of the things that Bart has said, because sure would be nice if we could get through August with fewer accidents than we have in the past. Bart, thanks for being on the program.
Yeah, let's make it a safe August and September.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, fly safe.